Hello everyone, my name is Aarti and you're watching HW News. Marital rape is an open secret in the Indian society. Many women in India experience non-consensual, forced sex at the hands of their husbands. In fact, the recent National Family Health Survey says that most married women experience sexual abuse at the hands of their partners, and the numbers are staggering. According to National Family Health Survey 5 conducted between 2019 and 2021, among married women aged 18 to 49 who have ever experienced sexual violence, 83% report their current husband and 13% report a former husband as perpetrator. Many of them said that their husbands physically forced them to have sexual intercourse with them even when they did not want to do so. This is similar to the IPC's definition of rape, and despite that, marital rape is not acknowledged in the country because of one exception in the rape law. The exception is for husbands, that the rape law does not consider it a crime when the perpetrator is husband. There have been petitions filed in the court to challenge the exception. One such petition came up before the Delhi High Court. However, the two-judge bench gave a split verdict. The verdict paves the way for Supreme Court to decide on the matter, but it also reopens the long-standing debate of whether marital rape should be criminalized in India or not. Today, we are talking to feminist activist and author Kavita Krishnan about marital rape and whether it is time that India should criminalize it. So, ma'am, recently dealing with marital rape, the Delhi High Court gave a split verdict, whereas Justice Rajiv Shakhtar said that the exception to the rape 375, IPC section 375, it's a violative of the constitution. The other justice, Justice Hari Shankar, said that it is not. It is not violative of the constitution. Now, looking at it from somebody who has been talking about criminalization of marital rape, what do you make out of this split verdict?
See, I've not been talking about criminalization of marital rape. That is not where I'm coming from at all. My organization has been simply saying that the exception should go. I'm absolutely not, it is not my position that every wife who experiences sexual violence inside a marriage would necessarily go for a criminal option. In fact, most women who experience domestic violence inside marriage do not go for a criminal option. So they do not go to the criminal route. It's in a very, very, very limited number of cases that women actually access that route at all. Okay, and that is for a variety of reasons. So I'm not saying that marital rape, every case of it must be prosecuted. Nothing like that. I'm just saying that the existence of an exception is basically existence of rape culture inside our law books. It is a license for rape existing inside our law books. What is rape culture? Rape culture is something that excuses rape, that basically says rape is all right in certain circumstances. And those circumstances are created by the woman herself. Now, what is this marital exception for rape saying? It is basically saying that, it is an exception that there is nothing to do with Indian, all this rubbish about Indian marriage institution, and its sacredness and all, that's nonsense. This has come from the British Victorian institution. This is Macaulay's marital exception. This is not, there is nothing Indian in this. And Britain also had this, and Britain got rid of this marital exception. So did other countries that Britain had colonized. India also should do likewise. What is this marital exception saying? It is coming from the notion that the wife was essentially the property of the husband. That once she married, the husband had basically a right over her body, that she lost any kind of autonomy over her property, that she, at that time, a wife did not have the right to own property in her own right. Whatever property she brought into the marriage would then be owned by the husband, would then be controlled by the husband. Likewise, her bodily autonomy, all of that was, under the control of her husband. We are not living in that world anymore. This is not colonial India. This is not a world. This is not even, old feudal medieval India. This is modern. This is a modern world. This is a modern India where absolutely we have a constitution that says that Indian citizens must be treated equally. That we must not have discrimination on the grounds of sex, on the grounds of gender. Very simply put, how can you distinguish between two victims of rape based on, if you have a definition of the act of rape, then how can you say that that act of rape will have different consequences based on who is the perpetrator, based on the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim, right? You cannot do that. What are you doing? By its very existence, you are vitiating the entire rape law. You are creating a situation where every victim of rape, every woman who enters a courtroom or who doesn't even enter a courtroom, she is affected by the existence of this law. This is not simply relating to wives who experience rape. Even if you are a woman who is not married, even if you are, you are somebody who is a trans woman, even if you are someone who is somebody who is not planning ever to marry, whatever it is, whatever you're, even if you're very happily married and you do not experience any violence in your marriage, it doesn't matter what situation you are in, you are affected by this law because here is a law that says that a woman is not equal to a man, and that under certain circumstances, she will be denied her humanity, her basic humanity.
Ma'am, when we talk about marital rape, it all boils down to acknowledging that something like marital rape exists in the society, because the general argument when we talk about marital rape is if it is between a married couple, if it is between husband and wife, then how can it be a rape?
But that's the whole problem with treating rape as an act of sex, right? Because that is the whole problem, that it is an act of violence. It is not an act of sex. So the issue, I think, that the very fact that we tend to look at rape, that is rape culture. The fact that we immediately tend to think of it as an act of sex, and therefore we start thinking of it in terms of desire, in terms of, through every other thing except its non-consensual nature. Whereas the very fact is that rape means the non-existence of consent, So the only issue before any courtroom in which the issue of rape is presented is there consent, is there not consent? So I feel that all this stuff that this Judge Harishankar said, I mean, that's, pardon my language, but I feel I'm permitted to do it. It is, bullshit, right? Because, what is all this? You are supposed to say, if there is a non-consensual act, is a wife not allowed to have, to say, I don't consent? Has she permitted, when she says, I'm married to you, is she signing consent forever? Does she never have a right to deny consent under any circumstances? Does she always have to give a written reason that, oh, I'm not well, or I'm, there is a particular reason why I can't, provide sexual services right now? What is this? This is not supposed to be a transaction. And here you are talking about it as a sacred institution, whereas actually you are saying that there is this, marital right that a husband enjoys to sex from his wife. And that language doesn't exist, okay? That doesn't exist in the marriage in any form, no matter what kind of marriage you're talking about. Sorry, that is not, you can have a married person, even a wife, can have a natural expectation of sex from her spouse or his spouse, right? But that is not an entitlement. An expectation is not an entitlement. So when you say right, it means it is like an entitlement. There's no question of a right. You don't have an entitlement to anything. You cannot say that I'm married and so I'm entitled to sex from you. I can expect sex from you, but if I am denied sex, I have no right to take it from you by force because I'm not entitled to it. It's pretty simple. I'm not entitled to it. So if you are, clearly if you don't feel like having sex with me, then there is some incompatibility that is pretty fundamental. If there is that kind of incompatibility, the only option left is divorce. The only option left is divorce. That is it, that can be grounds for divorce. There is no other, thing here. If there is an act of force, then it is a rape. Now, the real issue here is something else, which the judge did not address. You see, he denied this by saying all this stuff about sacred and what will happen to the sacred institution of marriage if we allow, if we admit this, if we remove this exception. What nonsense! What is happening to the sacred institution of marriage when you are allowing that a husband is battering his wife and even killing her? What is happening to the sacred institution of marriage when your Delhi High Court is saying that a woman in India is most unsafe inside her marital home, that she is most likely to die through violence inside her marital home? What does that mean? What does that mean for the institution of marriage? So if a husband is battering his wife, are we supposed to believe that he will batter his wife maybe to death, but he won't rape her, because of sacred institution of marriage? What complete nonsense! So in polite society, we are not supposed to say, that rape ho raha hai. But we can say कि अरे पीट के खत्म कर दिया, लेकिन rape नहीं हो रहा because chi. What on earth, So if that is a reality, what are we saying? We have to say that we cannot have that exception on the books. Now, I will address the other arguments for the exception, which this judge is not mentioning. He's not talking about those, but which are prevalent in wider society, in wider misogynistic arguments. But, that's not there in this particular judgment.
Yeah, one of the statement that he made says that if the wife refuses and the husband nonetheless has sex with her, howsoever one may disapprove, it can't be equated with an act of ravishing by a stranger. So exactly this kind of assumption that somehow a rape by a stranger is worse than rape by a husband. What do you think of this statement?
That is the whole problem, that in India, see, the judge he doesn't know what he's talking about. And that I'm putting it, as politely as I can in polite public language. I'm sorry, he doesn't know his law, let alone anything else. But the law does not say that rape is stranger rape. Stranger rape all over the world is a very, very tiny fraction of rapes that occur. Most rapes that happen occur at the hands of someone who is well known to the victim. Whether the victim is a child, whether the victim is an adult, whether the victim is a woman, whether the victim is a man. Perpetrators are usually men, but the point is that the victim and the perpetrator are usually well known to each other. The perpetrator usually enjoys the trust of the victim and violates that trust in order to basically violate consent. So most rapes are not stranger rape. Our media tends to, the world's media tends to focus on stranger rape because that is a more comfortable way of distancing ourselves from the reality that rape is not committed by some, violent stranger in some dark alley, where you can rationalize it as some accident that happened. Unfortunately, it is not that. It is not an accident. It is not, you could not have avoided it by avoiding the dark alley, by avoiding being out at night, by avoiding being out alone, etc., etc. Yeah. The point is that it is far more, the only way to, to prevent rape is by tackling rape culture, by tackling this idea that men have in their heads that they are entitled to sex from women, that they are entitled to ignore consent. and that women are not really entitled to say no. So this very thing that this judge has written in his judgment, that essentially a husband, or, if you say, if it is not a marriage, if it is a relationship, a long-term relationship, a boyfriend, or whatever, if you say that, if he did it, if it is done within that kind of an intimate partnership, intimate relationship, then it's not really a ravishment. What is this language, of ravishing and ravishment? We are not talking about this is not the language of some epic poem, this is not the Mahabharata that we are talking about. Or this is not the Iliad or, the Helen of Troy. What is this language of ravishing and ravishment? This is simply put, talk the language of consent. We have to demand this from judges. We have to demand this from the media. That when you talk about rape, don't talk in this woolly language and, don't talk in hyperbole. Don't throw, this is basically dust being thrown in our eyes, these words like ravishment and sacred and this and that. Just talk consent, non-consent. That's the only question in front of you. So the point is, when you are saying that the wife did not want it and the husband did it anyway, you are admitting that there was not consent. In your hypothetical scenario, there is no consent. If there is no consent, there is rape. Simple. There you can't say, array, but for me, rape is only ravishment by stranger. And so, ravishment by stranger, if that is not there, then it is not rape. I mean, you're not some Uncle G who is, holding forth in your drawing room. You are a judge sitting on a bench talking about women's actual lives. Women are listening to you. Your judgment is going to exist there for posterity forever. I would demand that this judgment be struck off the records. There has to be some way, because this is, for any rape survivor reading this is triggering. This is awful. This is a slap in her face, because basically this is yet another person in authority, the ultimate authority, sitting there and telling you that your experience doesn't count as rape, even though you didn't wish it. Your authority over your body doesn't really count. That's not the last word. So, you can't really, you can't decide that. Okay, something was done to you in spite of that, but so what, Were you ravished by a stranger? No, you were not. You had a long relationship with this person, or whatever, you kissed this person once. Did you mix him a drink? As Bobre asked the survivor in this case, Faruqi case. Mixed him a drink, right? You kissed him once, right? So then, what is to be expected? So I'm just saying this is completely unacceptable. It is enraging, and it is a reminder of how fragile Indian women's rights are in, fundamental rights, constitutional rights are in a court of law in India.
But when we talk about striking down that exception in the rape law, section 375, we also effectively open up such cases for to be tried under this particular section, that is section 375. So even from a legal point of view, how do you prove that it was a rape? I mean, this is the contention from the other side, that how do you prove that it was a rape? Because it happened in the four walls, and a husband might say that he thought there was a consent from the wife.
Sure. So I'm saying that this happens in any rape case. That's exactly. So now we are in the realm of the other arguments. So we are beyond the realm of these other, these ridiculous judgments, and we are in the realm of the arguments of the, Save Men Foundation and so on, which Save Family, which I basically call Save Patriarchy Foundation, patriarchal privilege foundations, basically. So these are the arguments. Now the point is, how will a rape case be decided in a court of law? The way any rape case will be decided in a court of law. I'm sorry, most rape cases are decided very badly in courts of law. They don't go in favor of women in courts of law. most rape cases go very badly for women in courts of law. Okay, they don't go particularly well for women in courts of law, uh, uh, especially cases where a relationship of where these kinds of relationships of where a prior relationship has existed. Okay,
Mm.
so if you look at, for instance, I would recommend that people look at Rukmini S's book on data in India. And of course, I mean, I'm not talking about low conviction rates and so on, because of course there's a large number of consensual relationships that are wrongly criminalized as
Mm.
rape because the woman's parents go and file cases. So that is a patriarchal violence, which is disguised as rape cases. They are actually patriarchal violence against intercaste, interfaith, and self-choice relationships, which are disguised as rape cases, and those are not rape cases, and very rightly they are eventually decided, and they should be. In fact, they shouldn't be entertained by the police at all. So the police is responsible for having those cases on the books in the first place. They shouldn't be. The police should absolutely not allow such cases. They should simply see whether the woman herself is saying that there is consent, and if she says there is no consent, out the case should go. If it is a girl, between the ages of 16 and 18, there also, the law is the problem, because the law against the recommendations of the Verma Committee, against the strong warnings of child rights activists and the the statutory body for child rights, as well as women's rights activists, the age of consent was raised to 18. And as a result, basically, this area where young, teenagers have relationships with each other, then the girl's parents will go and file a rape complaint, a kidnapping complaint, and basically then judges have their hands tied, because they can see that there is consent, and yet they are saying, because it's statutory, you're forced to say, acha, this, I'm forced to punish, I'm forced to pass this thing judgment there. These are huge problems. But these apart, if you look at other cases, then there are, so there, if you look at all the sections, so the cases of stranger rape are usually decided in favor of the woman. But if you look at cases where there is a prior existing relationship, I can tell you, I don't really know the statistical breakup of that, but I can tell you that in my experience of such cases, those cases do not go well for women. There is no rule. As a rule, they do not go particularly well for women. It's pretty difficult to, decide those cases. These go. It's a very patriarchal setting in the courts. So let marital rape cases also be decided in those courtrooms. What is this fear? Why? What is this thing? And how will you decide? Yes, it's he said, she said cases. How are they decided? Basically, because any allegation is decided within a larger matrix. So, for instance, it is seen whether there is it will be seen whether there are prior complaints of domestic violence. Okay, so if the woman is saying that this man used to repeatedly beat me up and so on and sexually molest me, and then finally I filed a rape complaint. So it will be seen whether she has made prior complaints of domestic violence anywhere, in any body, or, so has she told someone, written to someone, told someone, texted someone that I was raped, or, something happened to me. Okay, so all those things will be also part of the record. So basically, to see whether that complaint is credible or not on the balance, there are many things that contribute to that, and those things will be judged on that. It's very simple. And so, what is wrong with that? So
But
there is
but the
nothing.
problem starts with bringing these issues to the court, because the opposite side says, and in fact, I think the Indian government also once said, when previously in its previous argument, it had said that Indian society is not like a Western society, so you cannot see this issue in the context of a Indian society, and said that striking down this exception will open the floodgates of misusing this entire issue.
No, why? What is the Indian society means? Indian women are particularly prone to going around making false allegations against their husbands, and it's only because of a unjust law that they are prevented from going and complaining against that their husbands are raping them. I really don't understand this. I mean, what is this? What are you saying? On the one hand, you say that the Bharatiya Nari is this wonderful, a model of womanhood and this and that. On the other hand, you're saying that if this awful British colonial era law goes, then Indian women will suddenly turn into monsters who will start, leveling false allegations against their husbands en masse. Doesn't make any sense. My point is, look at the history of domestic violence. You have domestic violence criminal laws as well as domestic violence civil laws. Okay, I domestic violence laws. There is a whole halla about a whole noise created about misuse, but the actual facts show otherwise. The actual facts show underuse, not misuse. And basically, if there is any misuse, it is by the police. So the tendency of the police to go and arrest a family en masse, where there is no need to do that, instead of looking at specific allegations and acting thereby, that should be what there should be restrictions on. Instead, instead of acting against the police, there is this whole thing about women misusing the law and all of that, which is absolute. There is no evidence of that at all. So the point is that in domestic violence cases, we know very well that women are still dying of domestic violence. They're still dying of dowry violence. That problem has not gone away. And here we are talking about misuse of the law. A law that was brought in to protect women in such instances, and they're still being killed in these horrendous circumstances in the very place which is supposed to be the haven of safety and whatnot for women, right? So, so basically this, domestic violence and marital rape are part of the same continuum of circumstances of violence within the marital home, right? So, they will face the same challenges. Women will face the same challenges in bringing such cases to the fore. They will face the same challenges in proving such allegations in court. And unfortunately, men will continue to enjoy the same privileges as they continue to do. The only thing will be that there will be that what will stop existing is this awful law that basically continues to, say that women inside marriages in India do not have any rights over their own bodies. And I think that we are, in my experience of talking to young people, including young men, I think that we are doing, that the Indian political class and even the judiciary is doing a great injustice to Indian men. I think that these safe patriarchy types are basically too loud, and we are unable to hear the real voices of, especially young men and young women. In my conversations, I recall a debate on this issue some years back in Rajya Sabha TV. It was a discussion which had a lot of young men in the audience and a few young women. So it got a little out of hand because the lawyer, the two gentlemen lawyers on the panel, basically one of them, with the ruling party, and the other person, a very well-known, secular person, lawyer, and all of that. But they became very offended by my position and the position of a very well-known lawyer, senior lawyer, feminist lawyer. So they became very offended by our position, and they both staged a walkout. So, the anchor became very disturbed by this, and she thought that the audience, of this young men were clapping when these men were talking. So she thought the audience was with their position, and she became a little flustered and started saying, well, maybe I'll have to close down this. So I stopped her and I said, just hang on, just ask them what they're thinking. So she opened up the discussion with a lot of trepidation. And she found that all those young men started saying, no, we never knew this exception existed, and we are pretty disgusted to think that we feel like saying we don't want to be in a marriage where we are told that we have a right over, where are our wives like this. We don't want to rule over our wives like this. This is awful. So they said, why were you clapping? They said, we didn't know what to do. We wanted to basically boo and hoot, but we thought that would be rude. We wanted to show our opposition, but we didn't know how to do it in the studio. So I found that a lot of Indian audiences do that. They use the clapping thing to show disgust and opposition as well as approval. So it was surprising. In that audience, there were one or two men who were a little, who were saying, what happens, how will you prove, etc. Those anxieties were there. But largely, those young men were very, 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 very assertive in saying that we are shocked to know about this exception. We had no idea before setting foot in this room that this exception exists. And frankly, we are completely convinced by the argument that this exception should go. We don't feel threatened by the idea that we don't want a marriage that can exist only through the threat of this exception. That is pretty disgusting to us. We want a marriage to exist if it can exist on the basis of love and trust. Otherwise, what is the point? Yeah.
What do you think is the way forward in this? I mean, once this exception is struck down, we will stop calling it marital rape, because it will also come in the ambit of the rape, the larger ambit of rape. What do you think is the way forward?
Not necessarily. It is possible. I mean, there are many, many ways forward. There are options that can be discussed. I mean, I would say that, the way forward would be to first strike down the exception. If you want to create a category of marital rape, even that can be done. I mean, if you want to create a specific category, like you have other categories, where you have a specific category, even that is possible, where you are able to, have some kind of, for instance, to discuss the linkages between that and domestic violence and so on. I'm not ruling it out. I'm not a lawyer, and neither am I, very versed with how laws are made and so on. So I'm not speaking from that, but I'm speaking from a place of where feminist discussions around this and debates around this have happened. There are feminists also who have opposed. There are some feminists who have opposed the striking down of the law. I don't agree with them. Strongly disagree. But some of their arguments, if I were to take them on board, then some of their arguments may be covered by. I would say that perhaps their concerns could be covered by saying that, perhaps to file a case of marital rape, perhaps you could see whether there are prior complaints of domestic violence or not, and so on. Maybe. I am not particularly in favor of that, but I'm not ruling out completely that I wouldn't out of hand rule these discussions out. I would be willing to discuss them. I would be willing to debate them. But I would say those discussions and debates can come next. That is the category of lawmaking. First, this exception has no place. Get rid of the exception. And, maybe even what is the hurry to go make a law? Remove the exception, see what your experience is, see how, what kind of cases you're getting, watch the experience and study it for a few years, maybe. And then based on that experience, if you feel the need for for a law or something that helps you to, that will be more helpful for women, then you can make that law if you feel it will be more helpful. But do it from, because when feminists are raising concerns, they're doing it from the perspective of what will be more helpful for women, what will help women to come forward and so on, right? Because one of the things which we all know as feminists is that very often wives who are, want a solution from domestic violence and related matters don't want the husband to go to prison. They don't want the marriage to end. They very often want the violence to stop. And they want the husband to start behaving in a respectful and decent manner. Very often that is the case. And that is a very specifically Indian situation, by the way. That is a very, where marriage is very often, it is like the, de facto career for the woman. That is her, future, her life. That is how she sees it. That is a very specifically, yes, that is a very specifically Indian situation. This false complaint business is complete nonsense. But this is a very specific, yes, it is an Indian situation, which is why women are so reluctant to go down the criminal route. Which is why I say that the criminalization of, instant triple talaq and all is also, absolutely the wrong thing, completely uncalled for. Because that's exactly the same situation where women are not looking to send their husbands to prison. They want that the husband should start behaving in a decent and accountable manner and should not behave in a violent manner, or in an abusive manner. So, my only point about this marital rape exception is not that every woman, when women come to us with domestic violence complaints, we don't always egg them on to go and use the criminal law, because criminal law is not always the answer to what they are looking for. Our answer is always to urge them to see what they want and need, and try to help them to find, their way forward, in a way that keeps their dignity and their peace of mind intact, and, for them to find their confidence and dignity. So really, marital rape exception may not really change that situation very much, about what women actually access. You may find that you don't find a sudden flood of cases. My prediction is that you won't find a sudden flood of cases. You'll find some cases. You won't find a sudden flood of cases is my prediction, in fact.
So I think we cannot see it in a complete black and white, but the striking down of the exception should be the way forward.
Striking down of the exception is a must. I cannot trust our courts to do it, unfortunately, but I mean, what to say? I mean, I would certainly keep saying that is what should happen. I cannot trust our political executive to do it, political class to do it, as well as, I can't trust our...
Well, although the government has recently said that they will also relook at the entire criminalization of marital rape, I think they have said it, but let's see what they do about it. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. It was a very lovely experience talking to you.
Bye.